Naruto. The beginning of the tearful succession to the Sandaime. Chapter 81. Ha ha, ha 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 ha. Orochimaru suddenly threw his head back, letting out peals of laughter. The surrounding researchers, seeing their leader, who was usually as cold as ice, laughing like a madman, were somewhat at a loss. Team leader, are you alright? I'm fine. Orochimaru stopped laughing and put his glasses back on, flames burning in his pupils. I'm just too excited. My orders. Everyone return to your posts immediately. Review the experimental data from just now. I want to know why it only lit up for a moment. The figure in white had regained his usual composure, but his tone was filled with fervor. We have just begun. Yes. The members of Team Zero once again plunged into intense research. However, new problems quickly emerged. They found that although they could successfully make the light bulb glow, the light was always flickering, extremely unstable. Sometimes it was blindingly bright, other times it was so faint it was almost invisible. Moreover, this energy called electricity seemed to be very volatile and difficult to store. What bothered them even more was that this energy also seemed incapable of long-distance transmission. Team Zero tried to connect the generator to a light bulb at the other end of the laboratory using various metal wires. They found that the longer the wire, the dimmer the light bulb became, and beyond 100 meters, it barely lit up at all. The current is extremely unstable. Cannot be stored. Huge losses in long-distance transmission. One challenge after another, like towering mountains, stood before Orochimaru and his team. Orochimaru was once again stuck in a bottleneck. He felt like a thief who had found the door to a treasure, but couldn't find the key to open it. The laboratory of Team Zero was filled with a smell of burning and a strong sense of frustration. The researchers dejectedly tidied up the remains of the completely scrapped generator, their faces filled with despair. They were clearly only a step away from success. Orochimaru sat alone at a cluttered experimental bench, with the generator concept diagram from Hokage-sama, which he treasured, spread out before him. Again and again, he carefully studied every detail on the blueprint, trying to find the cause of the failure. The winding method of the coil is correct, the arrangement fully meets the requirements, the gear transmission ratio is also the optimal solution. They could successfully generate electricity and light up that small light bulb. But this electricity was like a wild horse, violent and unstable, completely uncontrollable. The current fluctuated greatly. The light bulb either flickered due to weak current or instantly burned out due to current overload. They also tried to store this energy using various sealing scrolls and special chakra containers, but without exception, all failed. Electricity seemed to be an uncontainable ghost, only able to bloom at the moment of its creation, then vanishing without a trace. Where exactly is the problem? He felt he had fallen into a huge bottleneck. The truth was right before his eyes, yet he couldn't grasp it. Orochimaru rubbed his throbbing temples, forcing himself to calm down. He stood up and began pacing back and forth in the laboratory, trying to find a clue among the remnants of the failed experiments. His gaze swept over the burnt coils, over the melted filaments, and finally landed on an experimental bench in the corner. On that experimental bench, some tools for measurement and positioning were placed. Among them was a small magnetic needle used for direction finding in the wild. Orochimaru's steps suddenly stopped. His gaze was fixed, intently, on that small magnetic needle. He remembered. At the moment when an experiment failed, the generator exploded, and a huge electrical pulse was generated. The corner of his eye seemed to have caught. This magnetic needle, it seemed, had deflected slightly. At the time, everyone's attention was on the exploding generator, and no one noticed this detail. But now, when he saw this magnetic needle again, that scene appeared in his mind with incredible clarity. Current, magnetic needle, electricity, and magnetism, could there be some connection between these two? An absurd, yet heart-pounding thought, grew wildly in his mind. Orochimaru quickly walked to the experimental bench, picked up the magnetic needle, and observed it carefully. Then, from a pile of scrapped parts, he dug out a section of copper coil that could still barely be used, and a magnet. Orochimaru took a deep breath and created a faint current at both ends of the coil. Then, he slowly brought the electrified copper wire closer to the still magnetic needle. A miracle occurred. The moment the copper wire approached, the magnetic needle, which had originally pointed south, suddenly deflected at an angle, as if moved by an invisible hand, pointing directly at the copper wire. Orochimaru's eyes widened. He abruptly cut off the supply of chakra, and the current in the copper wire disappeared. The magnetic needle slowly turned back to its original direction. He tried again. Current connected, magnetic needle deflected. Current disconnected, magnetic needle reset. So, that's how it is. Orochimaru's body began to tremble slightly. He understood. Electricity can generate magnetism. These two seemingly unrelated forces were, in essence, capable of influencing each other. This discovery, like a lightning bolt of creation, instantly cleared all the fog in his mind. All his previous confusion about why electricity was unstable, why it couldn't be stored, and why it couldn't be transmitted over long distances, seemed to have an answer at this moment. Because he had always been studying electricity in isolation. He had overlooked its other half, magnetism. Ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Orochimaru could no longer suppress the ecstasy in his heart, letting out a neurotic but endlessly joyful laugh. The other researchers in the laboratory looked at him as if he were a madman. Team leader, he didn't get too stimulated and go crazy, did he? Shish, quiet, you idiot. Orochimaru ignored everyone's gazes. He grabbed Hokage-sama's blueprint, picked up the small magnetic needle, and rushed out of the laboratory without looking back. He had to go see his teacher immediately. He had made a great new discovery. He also wanted to ask his teacher, was all of this already within his expectations? He rushed out of Team Zero's base, sprinting towards the Hokage Tower. Orochimaru's figure leapt rapidly across Konoha's rooftops, startling two cats in heat. His heart was filled with a craving for unknown truths. Bang! The door to the Hokage's office was violently pushed open. Hiruzen Sarutobi, who was reviewing documents, was startled by the sudden movement. The brush in his hand trembled, leaving a large ink blot on the scroll. Don't you know to knock? He looked up, his words catching halfway. Orochimaru stood at the doorway, his chest heaving violently. His usually indifferent face was now filled with excitement and fanaticism, even a hint of neurosis. His hair was a bit disheveled, his white research coat was stained with a few oil smudges, and he clutched a compass tightly in his hand. He looked like a patient who had just escaped from a mental asylum. Teacher. Orochimaru's voice trembled with excitement. Orochimaru. What's wrong with you? Hiruzen Sarutobi frowned, his heart sinking. This guy, he didn't go crazy from his research and electrocute himself into a daze, did he? Teacher. I think I've discovered an incredible secret. Orochimaru rushed to the desk in a few strides, slamming the broken compass onto the table. Look, it's this. Hiruzen Sarutobi looked at the object, his head full of questions. A magnetic needle. What's so special about? No. Teacher. Listen to me. Orochimaru interrupted him, speaking very quickly. Just now, one of our experiments failed again. At the moment of failure, a huge current was generated. Then, I saw the compass needle. It moved. Although it was only for an instant, I saw it very clearly. It deflected. It deflected in the direction of the current. A nearly insane gleam flickered in Orochimaru's eyes. Teacher, do you understand what this means? This means that electricity and magnetism, these two seemingly unrelated things, have some mysterious, unknown connection between them. They might be twin brothers. Hiruzen Sarutobi listened silently, his heart unmoved. Electricity generates magnetism. Looking at Orochimaru, who seemed about to ascend on the spot from excitement, Hiruzen Sarutobi suppressed a smile, displaying a profound and inscrutable expression. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowly stood up, walked to the window, and with his hands behind his back, spoke in a weathered tone, as if reminiscing about the past, electricity and magnetism. Orochimaru, it's good that you were able to discover this. This shows that your observational skills have surpassed most people. Teacher, you already knew. Orochimaru looked at his teacher's calm and composed back, his heart greatly shaken. Ha ha. Hiruzen Sarutobi let out two ambiguous chuckles, neither admitting nor denying. This ambiguous attitude, in Orochimaru's eyes, was an admission. His teacher, he already knew the relationship between electricity and magnetism. That blueprint he gave me before, that conceptual drawing of a waterwheel generator, was not a concept at all. It was clearly a theory he had already verified. He was just guiding me, testing me. To discover this truth by my own ability. Realizing this, Orochimaru looked at Hiruzen Sarutobi's back, and the admiration in his eyes had completely transformed into awe. If before, his teacher was a great scientist ahead of his time in his heart. Then now, his teacher was a god who had insight into the world's origins. Orochimaru. Hiruzen Sarutobi turned around, looking at his disciple who he had successfully fooled, and decided to add more fuel to the fire. He walked to the desk and pulled open the bottom drawer, which was always locked. Then, from inside, he took out a thick manuscript that looked very old, with its cover wrapped in special leather. There was no text on the manuscript's cover, only an emblem composed of intertwined lightning and magnets. Hiruzen Sarutobi gently placed this manuscript in front of Orochimaru. This is. Orochimaru reached out, trembling as he caressed the manuscript, as if touching a sacred work of art. The answers you seek, perhaps, are all within here. Hiruzen Sarutobi's tone was as calm as if he were talking about a trivial matter. Since you have already, by your own ability, touched the threshold of this field, then this book, now, it's time to give it to you. Perhaps, it can provide some small ideas for solving the current challenges you face regarding energy storage and transmission. Orochimaru's breathing gradually became rapid at this moment. With an almost reverent posture, he carefully opened the first page of the manuscript. On the title page, in a strong and vigorous handwriting, was a line of large characters. On the fundamental interaction of lightning and magnetic fields. The very first sentence was like a thunderclap that opened the heavens and earth, striking fiercely in his mind. Electricity and magnetism are two sides of the same force, mutually convertible. Law of electromagnetic induction. When a part of a closed-circuit conductor moves to cut magnetic field lines within a magnetic field, an electric current will be generated in the conductor. This phenomenon is called electromagnetic induction. Faraday cage. A cage made of metal that can effectively shield external electric fields. This principle can be used to create insulating devices to ensure the safety of power transmission. Boom. Orochimaru's mind went blank. Electricity can generate magnetism. Then, conversely, can magnetism also generate electricity? If magnetism can generate electricity, then can we create a device to change the form of electricity? If the form of electricity can be changed, then can we? A series of crazy, subversive ideas surged wildly in his mind. He seemed to see a door to a whole new world slowly opening to him. And behind that door were endless truths and mysteries waiting for him to explore. The entire Hokage's office fell into an eerie silence. Orochimaru stood there, holding the seemingly 1,000-pound foundations of electromagnetic interaction, rapidly scanning its contents. His mind was undergoing an unprecedented storm. Electricity generates magnetism, and magnetism generates electricity. Electricity and magnetism are two sides of the same coin. These theories, like keys, instantly unlocked countless difficult problems concerning energy conversion that had been locked away in his mind. Why couldn't electricity be stored? Because we had always tried to store flowing river water, without thinking about first turning it into a still lake. Why couldn't electricity be transmitted over long distances? Because we had always used thin pipes to transport rushing torrents, and a huge amount of energy would naturally be lost due to friction and resistance during transmission. What if we could use the principle of magnetism generating electricity to create a device that first converts the high-intensity, unstable current generated by a power generator into a low-intensity but more stable form, and then transmits it? Once it reaches its destination, another reverse device could transform it back into high-intensity current. Then, wouldn't that solve the problem of loss during long-distance transmission? Orochimaru's breathing became increasingly rapid. He quickly flipped through the manuscript in his hands. Electromagnetic induction. Faraday's law. Left-hand rule. Right-hand rule. Words he had never heard before, yet seemed to contain the ultimate truths of the universe, constantly challenged his understanding. The manuscript not only contained detailed theoretical explanations but also sketches of various experimental devices drawn by Hiruzen Sarutobi himself. For example, a peculiar device consisting of two coils of different sizes, which his teacher had named a transformer. Next to the sketch, there was also a clear annotation. By changing the turns ratio of the primary and secondary coils, the voltage can be freely adjusted. Step up or step down. Step up. Step down. Seeing these four words, Orochimaru's body trembled violently. He understood. He understood completely. All previous failures were because they had always tried to use brute force against an energy like electricity. But his teacher had long since stood on a higher dimension, telling him to learn to use laws to guide it, to transform it. What kind of wisdom was this? Orochimaru looked up, once again gazing at the man leisurely sipping tea in his chair. At this moment, the awe in his heart was beyond words. He held the book, his hands trembling violently from excitement. With a gaze like one looking at a god, he stared intently at Hiruzen Sarutobi, his voice hoarse beyond recognition, and asked the question that had been in his heart for a long time. Teacher, is there anything in this world that you don't know? Hiruzen Sarutobi put down his teacup, looked at Orochimaru's shattered worldview and existential crisis, and outwardly displayed a lonely expression of being at a high place, saying lightly in a tone full of the vicissitudes of an experienced person, Orochimaru, the ocean of knowledge is endless. What I know is but a drop in the ocean. Your future path is still very long. After speaking, he no longer looked at Orochimaru but picked up the documents on the table again, as if the conversation that had just been enough to overturn the entire ninja world was merely an ordinary tutoring session for him. And Orochimaru, upon hearing his teacher's words, was even more profoundly shaken. A drop in the ocean. Orochimaru felt his worldview being repeatedly crushed, reshaped, crushed again, and reshaped again by his teacher within a few short minutes. He took a deep breath and bowed deeply, deeply to Hiruzen Sarutobi. Teacher, I understand. With that, Orochimaru said no more, tightly clutching the manuscript as if it were the most precious treasure in the world, turned, and rushed out of the Hokage's office without looking back. He had to return to the lab immediately. Let the light called electricity illuminate all of Konoha. Watching Orochimaru's energetic, bustling departure, Hiruzen Sarutobi smiled with satisfaction. Done. Sigh, the thinking of geniuses sometimes just gets stuck in a rut. He shook his head, muttering to himself. Despite his grumbling, Hiruzen Sarutobi was in a very good mood. Once Orochimaru, that research fanatic, got the tech tree unlocked, the energy he would unleash would be astonishing. He could almost foresee how brilliant Konoha would be in the not-too-distant future. Let's take it step by step, can't go too fast. The Byakugan vision of the Hyuga clan, combined with electromagnetic cannons, can be used for sniping. Having solved the electricity problem, Hiruzen Sarutobi was in high spirits, stretched, and decided to leave work early today. He stood up, put on his Hokage hat, and his figure flickered, disappearing from the office. By the time Hiruzen Sarutobi returned home, the sky was already ablaze with a fiery red. He habitually changed his shoes in the entryway, took off his Hokage god robe, and hung it casually on the nearby coat rack. A familiar aroma of food wafted from the kitchen, instantly dispelling the chill from his body. Bawako Sarutobi, wearing an apron, was humming a tune and busy in the kitchen, with a sizzling sound coming from the pot. You're back. She poked her head out from the kitchen, a gentle smile on her face. Why are you so early today? I thought you'd be working on documents until late again. I've mostly finished what I needed to, so I came back early. Hiruzen Sarutobi walked to the kitchen doorway with a smile, leaning against the doorframe, watching his wife's busy profile, his heart filled with tenderness. Father. A childish, slightly slurred call came from the living room. Immediately after, a small figure stumbled out of the living room. He was wearing a small ninja uniform, his short black hair was a bit messy, and his big, dark eyes immediately lit up the moment he saw Hiruzen Sarutobi. Asuma Sarutobi. He was at his most lively, active, and clingy age. Father, hug. Little Asuma opened his short arms and rushed over, bumping into Hiruzen Sarutobi's shin. Ouch. Hiruzen Sarutobi feigned a cry of pain, then bent down and easily picked up the little fellow with one hand. As soon as little Asuma was in his father's arms, he immediately clung to him like a koala, using both hands and feet, rubbing his small head against his father's chest, and letting out satisfied giggles. Were you a good boy at home today? Did you make mother angry? Hiruzen Sarutobi pinched his son's chubby little cheek and asked with a smile. Asuma is the best. The little fellow puffed out his chest and replied proudly. Is that so? Hiruzen Sarutobi raised an eyebrow and looked at his wife in the kitchen. Bawako saw the intimate scene between father and son and smiled helplessly. Yes, he was the best today. It's just that in the afternoon, he insisted on imitating the Inuzuka clan boy, trying to do some dragon's back at home, and ended up breaking a flower pot. Hee. Asuma, whose glorious deed had been exposed, shyly buried his face in his father's arms, only revealing his big, darting eyes. You rascal. Hiruzen Sarutobi was amused. He didn't scold him, but simply held his son and kissed his small cheek. He didn't immediately put Asuma down, but instead, with an upward toss, he steadily placed the little fellow on his neck. Woohoo! Asuma instantly became excited, his small hands gently gripping his father's hair, letting out clear laughter. Hiruzen Sarutobi carried his son and slowly walked to the eaves of the courtyard. The evening breeze carried a hint of coolness, blowing on his face, which felt very comfortable. In the courtyard, the leaves of the old locust tree had already begun to turn yellow, and a few unknown late-returning birds chirped on the branches. Under the eaves hung a somewhat crudely made wooden windmill. It was a windmill made of bamboo strips and colored paper, somewhat rough in craftsmanship, with some burrs on the edges, clearly the work of a novice. When the wind blew, the windmill spun with a whooshing sound, looking quite beautiful in the afterglow of the setting sun. He had made it himself for his son a few days ago, having managed to squeeze out a little time from his mountain of documents. Hiruzen Sarutobi remembered very clearly that in his previous life, he also had such a windmill when he was a child. Although it was far less exquisite than one made by a craftsman, Asuma cherished it immensely, looking at it several times a day. Father, the windmill is turning. Asuma's small hand pointed at the windmill, shouting excitedly. Yes, the wind is blowing it, Hiruzen Sarutobi answered patiently. The wind is blowing it. Yes, the wind is something you can't see, but it can make the windmill turn, make the leaves dance, and in the summer, it can make you feel cool. Oh. Asuma nodded, half understanding. For a child his age, the world was full of all sorts of novel questions. And Hiruzen Sarutobi also enjoyed this time of being interrogated by his son. It was much more relaxing and pleasant than being bombarded in the office by Danzo and Sakumo, those two workaholics, with reports on reservoir naming and SAO KPIs. Looking at the pure smile on his son's face, Hiruzen Sarutobi's heart was filled with warmth and satisfaction. Suddenly, he felt that everything he had done had meaning. When he first transmigrated to this perilous world, he was entrusted with a mission, dancing on the edge of a knife every day. He used a simulator to deduce the future, used political maneuvering to balance various factions, and used an iron fist to implement reforms. All the things he did, in the end, weren't they just to protect this ordinary happiness before him? To allow his son to grow up carefree in an environment without hatred. To let him laugh heartily because of a crudely made windmill, rather than bearing the hatred of his clan or the burden of the village at such a young age. Survive, and led Konoha to survive with you. This goal, which he had set at the beginning of his transmigration, became even clearer at this moment. Just as Hiruzen Sarutobi was filled with emotion, Asuma, who was riding on his neck, suddenly made a new discovery. There are birds. Father, look. The little fellow's body twisted excitedly, his small hand eagerly pointing to a thick branch of the old locust tree in the courtyard. Oh. Where are the birds? Hiruzen Sarutobi smiled, pretending not to see them, and carried his son towards the old locust tree. There. Right there. Asuma was a little anxious, pointing with his small hand. Father, a little further, on that branch. Hiruzen Sarutobi followed his words and walked under the old locust tree. This locust tree was older than him, passed down from the Sarutobi family's ancestors. Its trunk was thick, its branches and leaves luxuriant, like a giant green umbrella, shielding this small courtyard from wind and rain. He looked up, and indeed, on a sturdy branch about 2 meters high, a bird's nest was built securely. The nest was not large, and its construction was a bit rough, but it looked very sturdy. At the edge of the nest, several fluffy, yellowish little heads peeked out, chirping with their tender yellow beaks. A slightly larger mother sparrow stood at the edge of the nest, holding a freshly caught green worm in her beak. She carefully fed the small worm, one by one, into the mouth of each chick. The chicks eagerly vied for food, eating with great delight. These little creatures seemed accustomed to the presence of this household. They showed no fear at all towards the two giants that suddenly appeared beneath the tree, only focusing on this feeding ritual crucial for the continuation of life. Asuma watched intently, his small face filled with novelty and excitement. This was his first time observing these small lives up close. Father, what are they doing? Asuma asked softly, afraid of disturbing the little ones in the tree. The mother bird is feeding her children. Hiruzen Sarutobi also lowered his voice, explaining this warm scene to his son in the simplest words. He stroked his son's soft hair and whispered, "You see, just like mother cooks for Asuma every day. The mother bird also has to fly very, very far every day to find worms for her children to eat. This way, her children can grow up quickly and eventually fly into the sky themselves. Then, aren't they tired?" Asuma asked, tilting his small face up in confusion. Of course they get tired. Hiruzen Sarutobi smiled, but, look at the mother bird, is she tired? Asuma followed his father's words and looked at the mother sparrow again. After feeding the last chick, she didn't fly away immediately but gently preened the somewhat messy down on her children with her beak. Her movements were very gentle, and her eyes were filled with something Asuma couldn't understand but could feel. That something was exactly like the look in his mother's eyes every night, when she coaxed him to sleep. No, she isn't. Asuma shook his head, stating with certainty. That's right. A hint of tenderness also appeared in Hiruzen Sarutobi's eyes, because guarding what is important to you doesn't make you feel tired. He held his son and stood quietly under the tree. Watching how the mother sparrow patiently taught her children to preen their feathers, watching how the chicks tremblingly flapped their wings at the edge of the nest. The lingering rays of the setting sun filtered through the leaves, falling on the father and son, stretching their shadows long, long. Hiruzen Sarutobi's heart became incredibly peaceful at this moment. He suddenly deeply understood another layer of meaning in the four characters of the Will of Fire. Guard. What is guarding? Is it the grand concept of the village? The heavy title of Hokage? No. It is about individual, vibrant, ordinary, yet incredibly precious lives. Thousands upon thousands of bonds called home, formed by the most ordinary daily routines. Guarding the village, in the final analysis, is to guard the ordinary yet precious vitality and hope under countless roofs. Hiruzen, Asuma, dinner. Just then, Bawako's gentle call came from inside the house, interrupting the father and son's contemplation. Coming. Hiruzen Sarutobi responded with a smile. He carried his son and turned to walk into the house. Asuma sat on his father's broad shoulders, glanced back at the small bird's nest, and then looked at his mother, who was smiling at them by the doorway. He seemed to understand something, yet also seemed to understand nothing at all. But he felt that today's sunset was beautiful, and the windmill spun a little faster than usual. Carrying his son back into the house, under the warm lamplight, dinner was already laid out on the low table. The grilled saori, crispy outside and tender inside, emitted an enticing aroma. Miso soup, simmered with kelp and daikon, was bubbling with steam. There was also a plate of cold cucumber salad, made with freshly harvested cucumbers from Sakumo's farm, looking crisp and refreshing. The family of three sat around the table. I'm going to eat. Hiruzen Sarutobi picked up his chopsticks, took a piece of fish, carefully removed the bones, and placed it in Asuma's small bowl. Thank you, father. Asuma said, looking up. However, he didn't immediately eat the fish. Instead, he suddenly opened his mouth wide, made an ah sound, and looked at Bawako expectantly. Bawako was momentarily stunned. Mama, feed me. Asuma kept his mouth open and flapped his arms a couple of times, imitating the little chicks. PFF'd. Hiruzen Sarutobi and Bawako couldn't help but laugh at their son's comical appearance. You child, of all things to learn, you learn to eat like a baby bird. Bawako still dotingly picked up a small piece of rice and carefully fed it into her son's mouth. Delicious. Asuma narrowed his eyes in satisfaction, mumbling indistinctly. Hiruzen Sarutobi looked at the warm scene before him, feeling that all the fatigue of his day vanished in this laughter. You've worked hard, Bawako. What are you talking about? Bawako rolled her eyes at him, but the smile in her eyes couldn't be hidden. Outside the window, night deepened, and the moon was high in the sky. Inside the window, candlelight was warm, and laughter filled the air. The family of three sat together, enjoying this ordinary yet warm dinner time. Hiruzen Sarutobi felt that this was perhaps the most beautiful future he could imagine. After dinner, Hiruzen Sarutobi didn't, as usual, bury himself in his study to pore over documents. He uncharacteristically suggested, Bawako, how about we go for a walk? Bawako, who was clearing the dishes, was a little surprised. She looked up, saw the rare relaxed smile on her husband's face, and also smiled, nodding, all right, it is time for a walk. The village's night scenery is quite beautiful now. Yay! Going out to play. As soon as he heard they were going out, Asuma, who had just eaten his fill and was feeling sleepy, immediately perked up, jumping off the tatami mat and running and leaping around the room. The family of three changed into casual clothes, held hands, and walked out of their home. Konoha at night was vastly different from a few years ago. They walked along Hokage Avenue, which Danzo had overseen the construction of. The wide bluestone path gleamed under the moonlight. The newly opened shops on both sides of the street had hung bright lanterns. Red, yellow, round, square, all sorts of lanterns illuminated the entire street as brightly as day, filling it with a lively, bustling atmosphere. The air was filled with the aroma of various foods. In front of the Akamichi barbecue restaurant, it was still bustling with people, with a long queue. The sizzling sound of barbecue and the laughter of people could be heard from afar. The Uchiha dessert shop next door was equally popular. Young Uchiha girls, with sweet smiles on their faces, warmly greeted every customer. Who would have thought that this clan, which was known for its arrogance and coldness not long ago, had now become the leader of Konoha's dessert scene? People came and went on the street. There were ninja who had just returned from missions, in groups of 3 or 5, walking arm in arm towards the tavern. There were ordinary villagers out for a post-dinner stroll, chatting leisurely. And there was a group of half-grown children, holding newly bought sugar-coated hawthorns, chasing and playing in the street. Asuma had long since broken free from his mother's hand, like a happy little sparrow, running joyfully ahead, looking at this one moment and touching that one the next, full of curiosity about this world. He occasionally looked back, grinning foolishly at his parents, revealing a mouth full of baby teeth. Hiruzen Sarutobi held Bawako's hand, walking unhurriedly behind. This was the Konoha he wanted. A strong, prosperous Konoha, full of laughter and joy. Where ninja and civilians could coexist harmoniously, and every clan could find its place and contribute to the village's prosperity. Children could run freely on the streets at night, without worrying that a kunai would shoot out of the darkness the next second. Father! Father! Look! It's Tsukumo Hataki's Kakashi. Asuma suddenly pointed nearby and shouted excitedly. Tsukumo Hataki was seen walking out of a bookstore, holding his son, who also had silver hair and wore a small black mask. Kakashi was still holding a thick, book-like tome in his hands. Tsukumo, Hiruzen Sarutobi greeted with a smile. Hokage-sama, madam. Tsukumo Hataki was also a little surprised to see them, and quickly stepped forward, bowing respectfully. Kakashi, this is your favorite Asuma. Tsukumo patted his son's head. Kakashi poked his small head out from behind the book, his big, dark eyes curiously examining Asuma. Kakashi, let's go play over there. Asuma was naturally friendly. He grabbed Kakashi's hand and ran towards a small mask stall nearby. Oh. Tsukumo tried to call out to him but was stopped by Hiruzen Sarutobi with a smile. Let them go, children should make more friends. So, the 3 adults stood by the roadside, watching the 2 small figures nearby. One with silver hair, one with black, heads together, picking out masks. How's the farm doing recently? Hiruzen Sarutobi asked casually. Everything is good. At the mention of the farm, Tsukumo's usually expressionless face softened a little. The constant temperature barrier farm has been put into use, and the vegetables are growing well. Shikaku says that next spring, we can try planting some fruits. That's good then. Hiruzen Sarutobi nodded. You've worked hard, Sakumo. It's what I should do. Sakumo shook his head. He looked at Kakashi, who was sharing the book in his hand with Asuma nearby, his eyes becoming incredibly gentle. To let these children grow up safely and securely is our greatest success. Upon returning from their walk, it was already very late. Hiruzen Sarutobi patiently coaxed a tired Asuma to sleep, tucked him in, and gently placed a goodnight kiss on his son's forehead. Leaving the room, Bawako had already prepared hot tea for him. Thinking about the village? She asked softly. Something like that. Hiruzen Sarutobi nodded but didn't rest immediately. He pondered for a moment, walked to the clothes rack, took off his casual clothes, and changed into a crisp black combat suit. So late, and you're still going out? Bawako was a little worried. Yes, to see A. Hiruzen Sarutobi's face showed a somewhat helpless, yet appreciative smile. Very stubborn, and very remarkable young man. After speaking, he walked to the window, waved to his wife, and with a flash, silently disappeared into the deep night. He was going to see someone. A man who, in the original story, used his life to write the most magnificent poem for the word, youth. Maida Dai. On the outskirts of Konoha village, there was a bamboo forest rarely visited by people. Unlike the bustling and lively scene in the center of the village, here, it was so quiet that only the rustling of the night wind through the bamboo leaves could be heard. Gecko filtered through the gaps in the bamboo forest, casting scattered light and shadows on the clearing. And in this clearing, a figure was undergoing rigorous training beyond imagination. Work hard, might. As long as you persevere, you will surely prove that even if you're not good at ninjutsu and genjutsu, you can still become an amazing ninja. A powerful shout broke the night's tranquility. Maida Dai was shirtless, his bronze skin reflecting the light of the gecko. On his body, several exaggeratedly heavy sandbags were tied, each with a large character for perseverance, written in black ink. Maida Dai was performing weighted squat jumps. Each squat almost compressed his body to its limit, and each jump used all his strength, as if to break free from the shackles of the earth and rush towards the bright full moon. Sweat flowed from his iconic bowl-cut hairstyle, across his resolute face, and dripped onto the ground beneath his feet. The sweat poured out as the glory of youth. Burn, my youth. He was still cheering himself on, his voice hoarse but full of passion. After completing 500 squat jumps, the young man didn't stop for a moment and immediately began one-handed handstand push-ups. 1. Youth. 2. Passion. 3. Effort. He was like a machine that never stopped, relentlessly pushing every ounce of his body's potential in an almost masochistic way. This was Maida Dai's daily routine. 5,000 push-ups, 5,000 squat jumps every day, running 800 laps around Hokage Avenue, and then doing several D-rank missions like finding cats and dogs. To others, he was an incomprehensible eccentric. A dead last, who was over 20 years old but still a genin. A ninja who had no talent for ninjutsu or genjutsu, yet stubbornly insisted on the most arduous and unpromising taijutsu training. But Maida Dai had never cared about any of that. He merely held fast to his belief, that training principle called, my youth, my choice. He firmly believed that with effort, he could surpass geniuses. He firmly believed that sweat would never lie. His youth, one day, would shine with the most dazzling light, like the summer sun. In the shadows of the bamboo forest not far away, a pair of eyes had been silently watching him. Hiruzen Sarutobi had been here, watching for almost half an hour. Watching the man under the gecko, drenched in sweat, living out his ninja way with his life, Hiruzen Sarutobi's heart was filled with emotion. In the original work, Maida Dai was a character who was not heavily featured but was incredibly dazzling. A genin for life, he activated the 8 Gates formation at the last moment, single-handedly confronting the hidden mist villages, 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist. He killed 4 and forced 3 to flee, protecting his son and comrades with his life. That immense brilliance illuminated Might Guy's entire life. In Hiruzen Sarutobi's eyes, this decades-long persistence, this purity unshaken by the outside world, was another extreme manifestation of the will of fire. Therefore, he specifically instructed Tsunade of the medical department to specially formulate a special military ration pill for Maida Dai that could restore muscle damage and replenish stamina, and then had Anbu deliver it to him under the guise of a mission reward. He wanted this uncut gem, in a relatively tolerant environment, to single-mindedly hone the forbidden jutsu that could shake the cage level, the Eight Gates formation. Truly, an amazing ninja. Even with Hiruzen Sarutobi's current strength, seeing Maida Dai's self-destructive training method, he couldn't help but secretly praise him in his heart. In the original work, Maida Dai opened the gate of death to protect his son, to protect the future of Konoha. What he had to do now was to let this power bloom at a more controllable and valuable time. Hiruzen Sarutobi was going to personally carve this uncut gem. The night sky was exceptionally clear, with stars twinkling. Youth is truly wonderful. Maida Dai looked at the starry sky, revealing a satisfied smile. Under the gecko, his bronze muscles were illuminated, full of youthful vitality and passion. However, at this moment when his mind and body were most relaxed, the bright full moon above his head was suddenly obscured by a dark cloud, and the surrounding light instantly dimmed. The entire bamboo forest was instantly plunged into a pitch-black darkness. Immediately after, a swift dark figure, without warning, attacked from the darkness directly in front of him. No sound, no chakra fluctuations. Only a sharp punch that made his scalp tingle. So fast. Maida Dai didn't even have time to think about who this dark figure was, whether it was an enemy, or, his body's instinct had already reacted faster than his brain. He didn't choose to dodge because it was too late. Maida Dai concentrated all his strength on his arms, his muscles instantly tensing. He crossed his arms, protecting his chest. The next second, that fist, carrying terrifying power, squarely struck his arm. Boom. A dull thud. Unrivaled immense force erupted from the opponent's fist, instantly breaking through his defense. His body flew backward uncontrollably. Crack. Crack. He consecutively broke 3 or 4 bamboo stalks as thick as a bowl before heavily falling to the ground, plowing a long furrow in the earth. Cough. A searing pain shot through his arms. He struggled, trying to get up from the ground, but every part of his body screamed in pain. How could this be? Maida Dai looked in horror at the dark figure standing silently in the darkness in the distance. The opponent had used only one punch. What kind of terrifying power was this? This had already exceeded his understanding of the word power. Maida Dai stared intently at the dark figure in front of him. The opponent just stood there quietly, not pursuing, not speaking, as if that earth-shattering punch just now was merely a casual swing. He couldn't see his face. But that imposing aura, like a towering mountain, made Maida Dai feel as if he was facing an insurmountable peak. The dark figure didn't pursue, nor did he speak. He just stood there quietly, adopting a standard taijutsu starting stance. Maida Dai knew that the opponent was waiting for him. Waiting for him to get up, and then, to deliver an even heavier blow. A sense of humiliation and unwillingness surged into his heart. He gritted his teeth, and with his still slightly trembling arms, he pushed off the ground, slowly getting up. Is he a ninja from another village? In his pupils, the fire of youth burned fiercely at this moment. Maida Dai knew that he might die here today. But even if he died, he would burn out his youth as a warrior. Ah, my youth will never fade. Maida Dai let out a roar and charged towards the dark figure. Between the bamboo groves, the gecko was obscured by dark clouds, and only the wind whimpered. Maida Dai's figure, with an unwavering resolve, charged towards the figure standing in the darkness. His force was heavier than any time before. Concentrating all his strength into his right leg, his body spun rapidly in midair, creating a blur, and his leg swept fiercely towards the shadowy figure's head. This strike was enough to shatter a boulder. However, facing this powerful and heavy blow, the shadowy figure merely made an extremely simple movement. He slightly turned his body and raised his left hand, using the outer edge of his palm to lightly meet Maida Dai's kicking ankle. The timing, angle, and force were all as precise as a textbook. Bang! A soft sound. Maida Dai only felt that his kick, which was capable of splitting rocks, seemed to have hit a slippery ball of cotton. All his strength, at the moment of contact, was cleverly deflected and dissipated by a subtle force, and then, in an even more bizarre way, it bounced back. His entire body lost balance in midair, turning several times awkwardly before he barely landed. Before he could steady himself, the shadowy figure had already moved in close, like a shadow. There were no storm-like attacks, nor world-destroying ninjutsu. There was only a punch, a kick, an elbow, a knee. Every movement was simple, direct, yet contained some profound truth of taijutsu. Maida Dai felt like an infant just learning to walk, being ruthlessly trained by a taijutsu master in the most basic ways. Every one of his opponent's blocks precisely struck the weak points of his force application, preventing his subsequent combos. Every counterattack accurately targeted the gaps in his defense, forcing him into a flurry of activity. His proud strength appeared clumsy and crude in front of his opponent. This was not an equal battle at all. This was an overwhelming lesson. Gradually, Maida Dai felt that something was wrong. Maida Dai realized that although every attack from his opponent left him in a sorry state, he had not aimed for a kill. For example, that previous hand chop, which could have easily severed his throat, merely tapped his Zhanjing acupoint, instantly numbing half of his body. And that knee strike did not shatter his ribs, but instead hit his abdomen, making him gasp for air and halting his offensive. Is this guiding me? An absurd thought arose in Maida Dai's mind. He couldn't understand. How could anyone in this world guide someone in this manner? This was even more brutal than his daily self-training. Concentrate. A steady voice rang in his ear. Maida Dai jolted, snapping back to reality, only to find his opponent's whip kick already sweeping towards his face. Without thinking, he immediately leaned back, narrowly dodging it with an iron bridge maneuver. The attack followed like a shadow. The whip kick missed, then followed through with a downward chop, transforming into a heavy axe kick, aimed directly at his chest. Maida Dai rolled on the ground, dodging awkwardly, then immediately sprang up. In an instant, he made a decision. Burn! Youth should not retreat. Maida Dai roared, mobilizing all the chakra in his body, and the muscles beneath his jumpsuit suddenly bulged. A approving smile appeared on the shadowy figure's face. Between the bamboo groves, the two figures clashed fiercely once again. Fists and feet met, producing dull roars. Maida Dai's offensive was like a torrential storm. His opponent's defense, however, was like an unmoving rock, steadfast against the wind and rain. With each clash, Maida Dai could clearly feel that his opponent was pointing out shortcomings in his movements and his force application techniques. He felt like a stubborn piece of iron, being repeatedly hammered and tempered by an invisible giant hammer. Although the process was incredibly painful, he could feel himself rapidly growing stronger. Fists and fists collided again. Bang! Maida Dai's body flew backward again, crashing into the edge of the bamboo grove, snapping a row of bamboo stalks in half. Cough cough. His consciousness began to blur. So strong. Is this a true powerhouse? Maida Dai lay on the ground, watching the figure slowly emerge from the darkness, feeling his eyelids growing heavier and heavier. After repelling Maida Dai, Hiruzen Sarutobi slowly retracted his arm, a little surprised in his heart. He had expected that blow to knock the young man unconscious. He hadn't expected him to stubbornly endure it at the last moment. This willpower, this courage to not retreat in desperation, was commendable. He knelt down and placed his hand on Maida Dai's chest. A warm and pure chakra slowly flowed into his body. It was medical ninjutsu. Although not as exquisite as Tsunade's, it was equally effective. He looked down at the young man before him, his eyes somewhat complex. Is this the Eight Gates' future? Just then, the dark clouds obscuring the gecko slowly dispersed. The bright gecko once again bathed the earth, illuminating the shadowy figure's true appearance. It was a weathered yet incredibly familiar face, enshrined on the Hokage rock. Konoha Hidden Village's third Hokage. Hiruzen Sarutobi. Maida Dai felt like he had a very, very long dream. In the dream, he kept running in the darkness, chased by countless mocking voices. Hey, look, it's that genin again. Doesn't he feel ashamed wearing that ridiculous green jumpsuit every day? I heard he can't even perform a few decent ninjutsu, only clumsy taijutsu. These voices were like needles piercing his heart. He wanted to retort, to loudly tell them that his efforts were not meaningless. But no matter how much he shouted, he couldn't make any sound. He could only keep running, until he was exhausted and fell to the ground. Just as Maida Dai thought he was about to be completely swallowed by the darkness. A beam of light descended from the sky and illuminated him. The light was warm, dispelling all coldness and darkness. A tall figure appeared in the light. Against the light, Dai couldn't make out the person's face. He only heard a gentle voice in his ear. Your youth was not in vain. Ah. Might Dai's consciousness surfaced from the chaos, and he slowly opened his eyes. What greeted him was the familiar bamboo forest and the bright full moon. He moved his body, and a strange sensation came over him. The intense pain that had spread throughout his body after the heavy blow was now completely gone. I was attacked by someone. And I was utterly defeated. Where is that mysterious powerhouse? Might Dai struggled, propping up his upper body with his arms. Just as he looked around, full of confusion, a voice, as calm as if it had merged with the night, came from beside him. Awake. Might Dai's body stiffened abruptly, and he turned his head sharply. Someone was sitting on a rock not far away. He wore a sleek black combat suit, its steady and upright silhouette outlined by the moonlight. That face, Hokage-sama. Might Dai's mouth hung open, his face filled with shock. He could not connect the man before him with the mysterious powerhouse who had completely crushed him with just a punch and a kick in the darkness. That was the highest pinnacle of Konohagakure, Hidden Leaf Village, the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. Why are you here? Might Dai's voice was incredibly dry, his tongue tied, his brain's thoughts stalled by the overwhelming shock. Hiruzen Sarutobi did not answer. He leapt from the rock and slowly walked to Might Dai. He squatted down and gently patted Might Dai's chest. Does it still hurt? No, it doesn't hurt anymore, Hokage-sama. The young man answered instinctively, his entire body tensed like a rigid rock. Seeing him so nervous that he didn't know where to put his hands and feet, a faint smile touched Hiruzen Sarutobi's lips. Your taijutsu foundation is very strong. One could even say, extremely solid. But, Hiruzen Sarutobi's tone shifted, and his gaze became sharp. Your fighting style is too crude. You are like an unpolished sledgehammer, only knowing to smash with brute force, but not knowing how to use finesse. Every one of your attacks is full of power, but also full of openings because of it. True taijutsu is not merely a release of power. It is the ultimate control over every inch of your muscles, every bit of your strength. It is discerning the enemy's weaknesses in an instant, and then, delivering the most fatal blow with the smallest cost. Hiruzen Sarutobi analyzed several fatal flaws Might Dai had exposed during the fight, one by one. From the timing of exerting force to the shifting of his center of gravity, and then to the choice of angles during attack. Every detail was analyzed incisively and to the point. Might Dai listened, utterly engrossed. These were areas he had never considered before, nor had anyone ever guided him on. He had always believed that as long as his strength was sufficient and his speed fast enough, he could overcome anything. But today, Hokage-sama had, through an overwhelming practical battle, opened a door to a whole new world for him. Hiruzen Sarutobi turned around, his back to him, and looked up at the cold, clear moon. I've been observing you for a long time, Might Dai. Every day you get up before dawn, run 800 laps around the village, rain or shine. Every day you persist in thousands of push-ups, thousands of squats, until you are completely exhausted. Every word Hiruzen Sarutobi spoke made Might Dai's heart tremble. He had never imagined that his silent, even in others' eyes, ridiculous persistence, had always been seen by Hokage-sama. People in the village say you're an oddball, a mediocre genin. Hiruzen Sarutobi turned around, his gaze calmly fixed on him. They don't understand why you waste your precious time on these tedious taijutsu trainings. They think you'll never become a powerful ninja this way. These words, like dull knives, once again cut open Might Dai's mental defenses. Might Dai's head slowly lowered, a flash of dejection in his eyes. Yes, in the eyes of those people, he was just a joke. However, Hiruzen Sarutobi's next words made Dai suddenly lift his head. But I know. What you persist in is an incredibly difficult, yet incredibly correct path. Behind that seemingly ridiculous persistence in others' eyes, what burns is a will of fire, named youth, hotter than any ninjutsu. You have never deceived your sweat, and your sweat will eventually repay you. Hiruzen Sarutobi walked up to him, extended his hand, and heavily patted his shoulder. Might Dai. Your youth has not been in vain. Boom. This heartfelt affirmation, like a bolt of lightning, struck deep into his soul. Might Dai stared blankly at the Hokage before him, at those gentle yet profound eyes. A surging wave of sorrow, without warning, rushed to his nasal cavity. His eyes instantly reddened. All this time, he had been like an outcast. Shunned by comrades, ridiculed by villagers, made a laughingstock by children. Everyone thought he was a fool, a hopeless dead last. He had never dared to hope for understanding, only silently, solitarily, persevering in his ninja way, burning with his youth. Until today. Until this moment. Everything he had done, everything he had persisted in, had actually received recognition from the highest existence in the village. A sense of happiness and a deep-seated feeling of injustice instantly broke through all his psychological defenses. Hokage, Sama. Might Day's lips trembled violently, and 2 streams of hot tears could no longer be held back, gushing down his resolute face. He wanted to say something, to say thank you, to say he would work even harder. But 1,000 words, when they reached his lips, were reduced to an inexpressible sob. A 20-something man, over 6 feet tall, was now crying like a child who had finally found his home. Hiruzen Sarutobi did not comfort him, only watched quietly, letting him vent all the emotions accumulated over many years. He knew this man needed such a complete release. After a long while, Might Day's crying gradually subsided. He haphazardly wiped the tears and snot from his face with the sleeve of his green jumpsuit. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Keep working hard. Hiruzen Sarutobi looked at him, a relieved smile on his face. Konoha needs strength like yours. I believe that one day, your persistence will shine with a brilliance as dazzling as ninjutsu and genjutsu. Having said that, Hiruzen Sarutobi said no more. His figure flickered, and he silently disappeared into the depths of the bamboo forest. Leaving Might Day alone, sitting dazedly in place. After a long time, he slowly raised his hand, wiped away the tear stains from his face, and a smile brighter than the sun appeared on his face. Dai tightly clenched his fists, and towards the bright full moon, towards this bamboo forest that had witnessed his sweat and tears, towards the entire world, he shouted with all his might. Yes. Hokage-sama. This is, youth. The shout echoed in the night sky, reverberating through the bamboo forest, startling a flock of roosting birds. Under the gecko, the young man in the green jumpsuit seemed, at this moment, to be reborn, rising from the ashes. The first ray of morning light pierced through the windowpanes of the Konoha Security Force headquarters, falling upon a young face etched with composure. Uchiha Fugaku stood before a mirror, meticulously adjusting his brand-new captain's uniform. The pure black fabric was impeccably tailored, highlighting his well-trained, upright physique and making him appear exceptionally valiant. On his back, the red and white, flaming clan crest glowed in the morning light like a burning flame, proud and conspicuous. Ever since the Uchiha Barbecue Squad gained renown throughout Konoha during the construction of the Naka River Reservoir, and received dual affirmation from Hokage-sama and Lord Danzo, he had been exceptionally promoted for his merits, becoming the youngest squad leader in the history of the security force. For him, this was recognition that hinged on Uchiha's honor. Fugaku, so vain first thing in the morning. A slightly teasing, deep voice came from the doorway. Uchiha Tekka, the security force headquarters chief known for his impartiality, walked in with his hands behind his back. He watched his most promising junior's meticulous demeanor, and the lines around his mouth, usually tight from seriousness, uncharacteristically relaxed. Chief Tekka. Hearing the voice, Fugaku immediately withdrew his scrutinizing gaze, straightened his posture, stood at attention, and saluted respectfully. All right, with me, none of those formalities. Tekka waved his hand casually, walked directly to his desk, sat down, and threw a dossier onto the table with a thwack. Today, you'll lead your squad to the South District. That's a new residential area, with many retired veterans and ordinary villagers who've just moved in. They're all quite stubborn, so be mindful of your enforcement methods. Yes, sir. Fugaku picked up the dossier, his eyes quickly scanning the information. Tekka observed his calm and capable manner, a sense of satisfaction almost overflowing from his eyes. Ever since he took over the security force and implemented iron-fisted reforms with the undeniable support of Hokage-sama, its atmosphere had been completely revitalized. This was no longer the closed-off, arrogant family militia that only served the Uchiha. Instead, it was a sharp sword truly serving the entire village, guarding Konoha's peace. Konoha's crime rate and internal conflicts had fallen to their lowest point since the village's founding. Tekka's implementation of a performance appraisal system completely broke the old custom of seniority, allowing capable and driven young people like Fugaku to stand out. Now on the streets of Konoha, ninja from the Inuzuka clan track scents with their ninja hounds, ninja from the Aburame clan command their parasitic insects for comprehensive searches, and even ninja from the Hyuga clan use their Byakugan to see through disguises. The Uchiha were embracing and integrating into this village in an unprecedented way. And the source of all this pointed to the far-sighted man on the Hokage rock. Oh, right, Fugaku. Tekka seemed to remember something suddenly, leaning forward slightly, his tone becoming gossipy. How are things between you and Makoto lately? Fugaku's usually taut face instantly broke, his ears turning red at a visible speed. Chief, we're still in the getting to know each other stage. Haha. You kid, still so thin-skinned. Tekka burst into laughter, extending his large, fan-like hand and patting his shoulder heavily. She's a good girl, gentle, kind, and quite strong. You better hurry up. I hear quite a few excellent young men are asking about her lately. I know. Fugaku's voice was barely a whisper. Alright, go. Tekka stood up, his smile receding, his tone returning to seriousness. Remember, we are the security force, the first line of defense for the village's tranquility. Our duty is to protect every blade of grass and every tree in the village. Yes, Chief. Fugaku nodded heavily, turned, and left with firm steps. Watching his retreating figure, Tekka stood with his hands behind his back, his gaze somewhat profound. This kid is good steel. He's capable, responsible, and his loyalty to the village and clan is unquestionable. Given time, he will achieve great things. Tekka cleared his throat, his gaze turning to Uchiha Yashira, the vice chief, who was watering a pot of cymbidium in the corner. Yashira, what do you think? A perfect uncut jade. Yashira put down the watering can, speaking concisely, his strength and character are top tier among his peers. What's even rarer is that he fully understands the philosophies of Hokage-sama and Lord Kagami. He is the Uchiha of the new era. Uchiha Tekka slowly nodded, a flicker of resolve in his eyes. I intend to recommend him to the clan head. Recommend him. Yashira was somewhat surprised, his current position is already quite. It's not enough. Tekka interrupted him, his voice grave, the future of the Uchiha needs a more brilliant leader. This uncut jade, Fugaku, can only be polished into a sharp tool by me. But his capacity extends beyond that. He needs a broader stage, and a more significant teacher to personally sculpt him. Uchiha Fugaku had no idea that his future path had already been meticulously arranged by his two superiors. He arrived downstairs, where the patrol squad had already assembled. In the team, besides 3 Uchiha clan members, there were 2 ninja from the Inuzuka clan with their spirited ninja hounds, and 1 silent, shadow-like Aburame clan member. Attention, everyone. Move out. With Fugaku's command, the squad marched in unison, beginning their day's work. Walking along the bustling Hokage Avenue, observing the rows of shops, the lively crowds, and the innocent smiles of children everywhere, Fugaku felt an inexpressible sense of pride well up within him. This was the village they protected and built with their own hands. The patrol mission went unexpectedly smoothly. Occasionally, a few light-fingered individuals would be sniffed out from the crowd by the Inuzuka clan's ninja hounds, even before Fugaku's Sharingan could catch their abnormal movements or shifting gazes. At noon, they went to the Akamichi clan's barbecue restaurant for lunch. Thanks to their security force uniforms and Fugaku's familiar face from the barbecue squad, the owner generously gave them a 20% discount and personally brought over a plate of succulent, Konoha special pork. Ah, Captain Fugaku, we've got it good, don't we? A young Inuzuka ninja mumbled enviously while chewing on barbecue. My brothers who were sent to the farm to herd sheep, they spend all day with those cows and sheep, they're practically bleeding at home now. Nonsense. Another Inuzuka ninja immediately retorted. My big brother said that farm director Sakumo taught them that herding sheep is also a form of training. It's for practicing tracking, stealth, and teamwork. Plus, the farm food is good, whole roasted lamb is plentiful. Hey! Stop! Stop! Quickly tell your Kuro Maru to let go. My pants are about to fall down. Ha ha ha. Listening to his teammates' uninhibited laughter and banter, Fugaku simply smiled, quietly adding more barbecue to their plates. Patrolling, herding sheep, burning chakra cement, they were all contributing to this village in their own ways. In the evening, the afterglow of the setting sun dyed the sky a warm orange-red. Today's patrol mission went quite smoothly. Who? Just as Uchiha Fugaku was somewhat distracted, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Fugaku, Commander Tekka has ordered you to return to headquarters immediately. It was Uchiha Yuzora of the security force. Oh, Yuzora. Return to headquarters. Is there an urgent mission? Fugaku's eyes lit up instantly. I don't know. Fugaku dared not delay, immediately handed over the patrol mission to Yuzora, and then quickly rushed back to the security force headquarters. Security force headquarters. Commander. Uchiha Tekka nodded, his expression more serious than usual. No need to change your clothes yet, come with me. Yes, Commander. Fugaku was a bit puzzled, but he immediately followed him. Tekka walked directly out of the headquarters building and headed towards the Uchiha clan's compound. Along the way, neither of them spoke. Fugaku could feel that Commander Tekka seemed a bit different today. Finally, they stopped at the home of the Uchiha clan leader, Uchiha Kagami. Go in, the leader is waiting for you, Tekka told him. Waiting for me? Fugaku was even more puzzled. Lord Kagami, he is the leader of the Uchiha clan, Hokage-sama's most trusted right-hand man, and a godlike existence in the hearts of all young Uchiha ninja. How could he suddenly want to see him? Uchiha Kagami's home was a typical Japanese-style courtyard. Several maple trees were planted in the courtyard, and there was a small pond with a few koi leisurely swimming in it. With an uneasy heart, Fugaku straightened his attire, took a deep breath, and gently knocked on the door. Please come in. A gentle and peaceful voice came from inside the house. Fugaku pushed open the door and walked in. His clan leader was kneeling on the tatami under the veranda, arranging the tea set in front of him. He was wearing a plain, casual robe, with a gentle and jade-like demeanor, and a warm smile on his face, as if he were not the decisive commander on the battlefield, but a hermit detached from the world. You're here. Fugaku. Sit down. Yes, leader. Fugaku bowed respectfully, then sat upright opposite him. Although the clan leader in front of him seemed relatively gentle, Fugaku felt an invisible pressure. Not only because the other party was the clan leader, but also because of his unfathomable strength and his trusted position with Hokage-sama. His performance today would determine his future path. Uchiha Kagami was not in a hurry to speak, just quietly brewing tea. Washing cups, warming the pot, adding tea, pouring water, every movement was fluid and full of a certain zen-like quality. In the tea room, there was only the gurgling sound of boiling water pouring into the teapot, and the clear aroma of tea leaves unfurling in the water. Fugaku's heart also gradually calmed down in this tranquil atmosphere. After a long while, Uchiha Kagami finally pushed a freshly brewed cup of hot tea, emitting an elegant aroma, in front of Fugaku. Try it. Thank you, leader. Fugaku picked up the teacup and, imitating Kagami, took a gentle sip. The tea was rich and mellow, with a sweet aftertaste. Tekka specifically recommended you to me. Uchiha Kagami finally broke the silence. His voice was gentle, as if he were chatting casually with a junior. He said you are the most outstanding among the new generation of Uchiha. Your temperament is steady, and you are a talent to be nurtured. Fugaku's heart skipped a beat, but he forced himself to suppress his excitement and humbly said, Commander Tekka exaggerates, I still have many shortcomings. Haha, modesty is a good thing. Uchiha Kagami smiled, however, with me, you don't need these formalities. He put down his teacup, and his gaze became serious. Those eyes, which always carried a smile, now seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. Fugaku, I called you here today not to talk about ninjutsu, nor about missions. I just want to ask you one question. Fugaku's heart instantly jumped into his throat. In your opinion, which is more important, the village or the clan? This question instantly exploded in Fugaku's mind. This was an incredibly sharp and sensitive question. In the past, in the era when the stubborn elders still held the family's power, the answer to this question was unique and unquestionable, the clan, above all else. But now, times have changed. Fugaku's mind rapidly flashed through the changes that had occurred in the village over the years. He recalled Hokage-sama's speech about protection at the opening ceremony. He thought of Danzo, that once most feared root of darkness, who now toiled day and night for the construction of the village, earning everyone's respect. The legendary White Fang of Konoha toiled in the fields, sweating for the villagers' well-being. He thought of himself and his clansmen. They were no longer suspected, no longer isolated. They could use their flames to forge the strongest foundations for the village. They could use their Sharingan to guard the bustling streets for the village. The village and the clan. Fugaku's breathing gradually steadied. His expression also slowly changed from initial nervousness to determination. Uchiha Kagami did not rush him, just quietly watched, waiting for his answer. This question was a soul-searching one for any Uchiha. Just then, Uchiha Kagami posed a second question, one that struck even deeper into the soul. Our Uchiha Sharingan, what should its powerful strength exist for? Is it to pursue even greater power? Or, Uchiha Kagami's gaze became profound and distant. Like now, using it to maintain order, guard the light, to see a path that allows both the clan and the village to prosper together. Fugaku fell silent. He lowered his head, looking at the clear tea in the cup, which reflected his blood-red eyes. Sharingan, dubbed the cursed eyes, it brought not only immense power but also endless pain and conflict. It had witnessed too much hatred, too much slaughter. Could it really only be used for combat? Fugaku recalled his clansmen at the dam construction site, who used the Sharingan's dynamic vision to precisely control the flame temperature. He remembered his comrades in the security force, who used the Sharingan's insight to find criminals. He suddenly felt that his previous understanding of these eyes was too narrow. Power, in itself, has no attribute. What determines its direction is the person who uses it, the direction of their heart. Having understood this, Fugaku's heart suddenly opened up. He slowly raised his head, meeting Uchiha Kagami's eyes, which seemed to penetrate everything, ready to give the answer that had already formed in his heart. The tea room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Uchiha Fugaku looked into Lord Kagami's deep eyes, feeling as if all his thoughts were seen through clearly. This was an opportunity to prove his path to the clan head, to Hokage-sama, and to himself. He slowly stood up, bowed to Uchiha Kagami, and then began to elaborate his answer. Clan head, I believe the village and the clan. Their relationship is more like a tree and its branches. The village is the towering tree that shelters all of us from wind and rain. And we Uchiha, along with other clans, are the branches of this great tree. The villagers and common folk are the lush leaves. Only if the roots are deep enough to draw nutrients from the earth can the trunk be strong enough. Only if the branches are resilient enough can they stretch towards the sunlight, providing space for the leaves to grow. Only if the leaves are lush enough can they perform photosynthesis and, in turn, nourish the entire tree. Tree, branches, and leaves, they are one entity, indispensable. The weakening of any one part will lead to the withering of the entire tree. Only by uniting as one can we ensure that the great tree of Konoha stands tall forever, resisting all storms. This theory of the tree and its branches and leaves made a hint of surprise flash in Uchiha Kagami's eyes. He hadn't expected Fugaku to extend such a fitting and profound metaphor from the will of fire. This was no longer simple imitation, but showed his own understanding and thought. Fugaku didn't pause, continuing, as for the Sharingan. He paused for a few breaths, his gaze becoming resolute. In the past, it might have existed to survive in times of chaos, to fight on the battlefield. It witnessed too much hatred and tragedy. However, times have changed. In this new era created by Hokage-sama, the power of the Sharingan should no longer be bound by hatred. It should be a pair of eyes that sees the future, discerns evil, and protects comrades. It can help us precisely control flames to forge the strongest cornerstones, to warm the coldest winters. The power of the Sharingan exists to protect the hard-won peace that Hokage-sama has brought us. It exists to protect every single person in the village. This is my answer. His words were impactful and powerful. Uchiha Kagami listened quietly. His face, which always bore a gentle smile, was now filled with relief. He seemed to see his younger self. The self who was also inspired by second Hokage-sama's will of fire and resolve to become the bridge connecting the village and the clan. The torch was being passed on. The seed named protection, planted by Hokage-sama, had now taken root and sprouted in the hearts of the younger generation of Uchiha, and was about to grow into a towering tree. Good. Well said. Uchiha Kagami could no longer suppress his inner excitement. He stood up and heavily patted Fugaku's shoulder. Fugaku, you have not disappointed me, nor have you disappointed Hokage-sama. He looked at the young man before him, whose eyes were clear and full of ideals and ambitions, and said solemnly. From today on, you are my disciple, Uchiha Kagami's disciple. I will pour out everything and personally teach you. Not only ninjutsu, but also how to become a qualified leader, how to balance the relationship between the village and the clan, how to inherit and carry forward the true will of fire. Disciple. Uchiha Fugaku's body trembled suddenly. He couldn't believe his ears. Lord Kagami wanted to take him as a disciple. One must know that Lord Kagami was Hokage-sama's most trusted arm, and one of the most powerful figures in Konoha's upper echelons today. Fugaku knew exactly what it meant to become his disciple. It meant that he would truly enter the core of Konoha's power. He would follow in the footsteps of Lord Kagami and Hokage-sama, moving towards a broader and brighter future. Immense joy instantly overwhelmed him. Fugaku was trembling with excitement. He suddenly stood up and bowed deeply to Uchiha Kagami. Teacher. That address of teacher was sincere, full of excitement and gratitude. Uchiha Kagami smiled and helped him up. Good, good. He looked at Fugaku as if looking at an uncarved jade. This jade, in his hands and under the guidance of Hokage-sama, was bound to shine brilliantly. Teacher, I. Fugaku's excited feelings lingered for a long time. All right, that's enough for today. Kagami said with a smile, go back and rest well. Starting tomorrow, your training will be very tough. Yes, teacher. I will never disappoint you. Fugaku bowed deeply again, then, filled with infinite anticipation for the future, turned and left Kagami's house. From today on, his life would turn a new page. He would follow in the footsteps of his teacher and Hokage-sama, moving towards a broader and brighter future. Meanwhile, on the other side of the village. Inside a newly constructed, massive barrier field specifically for genjutsu training. Kurenai Yuhi, Konoha village's genjutsu master second only to the Uchiha, was gravely giving her final instructions to the genin before her. Are you all ready? Her voice was elegant and calm, yet carried an undeniable authority. Yes. Shinku Yuhi-sensei. The young genin responded in unison. Their faces showed both tension and excitement. Because they knew that what they were about to experience was a unique training method in the entire ninja world. Very good. Kurenai Yuhi nodded. She glanced at the huge and complex genjutsu barrier behind her, a hint of pride flashing in her eyes. This training program, named Realistic Battlefield Simulation System, by Hokage-sama, was jointly developed by her, the Nara clan, and the intelligence department of the Uchiha Security Force, after months of painstaking effort. It utilized the Yuhi clan's most advanced genjutsu, combined with the Yamanaka clan's mental perception, and even drew upon some of Hokage-sama's theories on sensory deception. It could simulate a realistic battlefield environment in an absolutely safe setting. From sight, to sound, to smell, and even touch and temperature. Remember, once you enter the system, everything you experience is genjutsu. However, your body, your brain, will perceive it as real. Kurenai Yuhi's expression became incredibly serious. You will smell blood, feel the pain of wounds, and even, experience death. This is a very cruel training, but it is also an opportunity for you to grow the fastest. I hope you will cherish this opportunity. Now, go in. The genin exchanged glances, seeing determination in each other's eyes. They entered the barrier and sat down cross-legged. Konoha Village, Genjutsu Training Barrier Field. The last rays of the setting sun had completely dipped below the horizon, and night had enveloped the entire village. Inside the barrier field, however, it was as bright as day. Dozens of prototype illumination orbs, provided by Orochimaru's Team Zero, were embedded around the field, emitting a steady light. Uchiha Yexian, Shimura Sota, Sarutobi Bocheng, and Tachibana Shilin were sitting cross-legged on 4 cushions in the center of the barrier, following teacher Shinku's instructions. They closed their eyes, trying to regulate their breathing, their hearts filled with tension and anticipation. Is everyone ready? Teacher Shinku's calm voice echoed through the field. Yes. Teacher Shinku. Yexian and the three others responded in unison, their voices clear and full of the youthful vigor characteristic of young ninja. Very good. Teacher Shinku nodded with satisfaction. He turned and gently waved his hand at the several ninja behind him, who were also dressed in Yuhi clan attire. Activate Genjutsu, Real Battlefield Simulation System. Yes. More than a dozen ninja of the Yuhi clan simultaneously began to form hand seals rapidly, their movements uniform, as if they had practiced thousands of times. Buzz. An invisible, immense chakra fluctuation instantly spread out from the barrier in all directions. Yexian and the three others felt a slight dizziness in their brains, as if their consciousness was slowly being drawn out of their bodies by a gentle yet irresistible force. The scene before their eyes began to blur and distort. The breathing of their companions around them, the voices outside the barrier, the rustling of leaves in the wind, everything was rapidly fading away. Then came a pure, unadulterated white. Time, space, self, all concepts seemed to lose their meaning at this moment. Is this, the system developed by Hokage-sama and teacher Shinku? This was Yexian's last thought before his consciousness completely sank, he didn't know how much time had passed. The first sense to recover was touch. A sticky sensation came from his cheek. Drip, drip. Liquid dripped onto his face, sliding down his skin. Next, came smell. A fishy smell, a pungent smell mixed with damp earth and rotting leaves, aggressively filled his entire nasal cavity. This smell made Tachibana Shilin's stomach churn, almost making her vomit. Then, came hearing. Rain, incessant rain, the sound of rain hitting some kind of canvas, and indistinct shouts from afar. Finally, it was sight. The four of them almost simultaneously snapped their eyes open. The scene before them was no longer the barrier field. They were standing on a muddy clearing, the sky was gray, and an irritating drizzle was falling. In front of the four of them were military camps, one after another. Simple, earth-yellow tents stood haphazardly in the mud, their colors dulled by the rain. Between the tents, flags bearing the Konoha symbol were planted, drooping in the wind and rain, looking weak. Around them, hurried figures were everywhere. They wore uniform Konoha attire, their faces etched with the grimness and fatigue characteristic of war. Some were meticulously wiping their ninja swords and kunai under the tent eaves, others were working in groups of 3 to 5, jointly driving huge wooden stakes into the mud to reinforce the camp's defenses. These people seemed to ignore their sudden appearance, as if they were just air. In the distance, at the entrance of a large medical tent, several medical ninja were carrying a blood-soaked, unrecognizable casualty, rushing inside. The smell of blood and disinfectant mixed together, detectable from afar. All of this was unbelievably real. Oh my god. Shimura Soda's mouth was wide enough to fit an egg. He stammered, looking at the incredibly real scene before him. Is this Genjutsu? Teacher Shinku is too amazing, isn't he? This is simply identical to reality. He took a step, wanting to experience that reality. Wait. Uchiha Yexian whispered, grabbing his hand. The moment he opened his eyes, Yexian had already subconsciously activated his Sharingan. The single tomo slowly rotated in his eye socket, vigilantly scanning everything around him. As the captain, his first reaction was not shock, but danger. It was too real. Every person here, every tent, even the feel of every inch of mud under his feet, was so real it made his scalp tingle. If teacher Shinku hadn't repeatedly emphasized that this was only Genjutsu before they entered, he would have even thought he had been truly transported to the battlefield by some space-time ninjutsu. Captain, Soda was startled by Yexian's serious gaze and realized his impropriety, quickly withdrawing his hand. It's so scary here. Tachibana Shilin's voice trembled slightly. As a medical ninja, she was particularly sensitive to the aura of life. She could clearly feel a shadow of death pervading this camp. The faint killing intent on the ninja, the painful wails of the wounded, all reached her senses. Oh my god, this incredibly masterful Genjutsu, is this really Genjutsu? I can even feel how sticky the mud under my feet is. This is no longer within the realm of Genjutsu. The team's navigator, Sarutobi Bocheng, had also put away his usual gentle wisdom, his face full of solemnity. He squatted down, carefully observing the surroundings. The air humidity is over 90%. The wind direction is unstable, with continuous light breezes. The environment here is exactly the same as the land of rain described in textbooks. The depth of rainwater penetration into the soil is also exactly the same as a real rainy environment. This genjutsu even simulates the most subtle natural laws. As expected of the man hailed as the calm navigator, even in this environment, he maintained absolute composure, analyzing his surroundings at the first opportunity. Just as the four of them were shocked, vigilant, and analyzing everything around them. A voice they were incredibly familiar with and deeply respected echoed directly in their minds. Welcome to the real battlefield simulation system. It was Hokage-sama's voice. All four of them trembled violently. This is your first practical combat lesson. Everything you see, hear, smell, and touch will be absolutely real. You will feel pain, you will bleed, and even, you will experience death. The only difference is that when your vital signs drop below a certain threshold, the system will automatically force your consciousness out. But before that, I hope you will treat this as a real battlefield. Hokage-sama's voice paused slightly, seemingly giving them time to accept and process. Then, the voice sounded again, carrying an epic, profound weight. The time you are currently in is the Second Great Ninja War period. The location is the eastern border of the Land of Rain, the Konoha 1st Army Corps camp. Ninja War. Land of Rain. These terms made all four of them a little nervous. They had actually returned to that war-torn era. Hiruzen Sarutobi's voice, like the most professional game narrator, introduced the background of this instance to them without any emotion. The Second Great Ninja War has erupted. The leader of Hidden Rain Village, the demigod Hanzo, has declared war on the lands of fire, wind, and earth simultaneously. The Land of Rain has become the most brutal meat grinder. To tie down the enemy and create opportunities for other fronts, the village has dispatched several squads led by Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru, to penetrate deep into the Land of Rain to carry out decoy missions. And what you are about to face are the cruelest and most ruthless enemies in the ninja world. The puppet masters of Sunagakur, the demolition units of Iwagakure, and the elusive assassins of Hidden Rain Village. Now, Hokage-sama's voice carried a hint of anticipation. Listen to your first mission. As soon as the words fell, the four of them felt as if their bodies were gently pushed by an invisible force. Their gazes involuntarily turned towards the largest main commander's tent in the center of the camp, which was lit up. A bold and loud voice was faintly coming from the tent, seemingly deploying something. This places the frontline command post, with Jiraiya-sama, one of the Konoha's 3 Sannin, as the supreme commander. Go, futures of Konoha. Hokage-sama's voice slowly faded from their minds, but the shock lingered, like an echo, refusing to dissipate. The Second Great Ninja War, Land of Rain frontline camp. The commander was one of the legendary Sannin, Jiraiya-sama. These keywords, like powerful bombs, exploded in the hearts of the 4 members of Yexian's squad. Good heavens, did we just travel back into a history book? Shimura Soda lowered his voice, but the excitement in his tone was impossible to hide. His eyes were wide as he curiously observed the hurried NPC ninja around him, feeling as if he were exploring a massive theme park. Soda. Uchiha Yexian immediately reprimanded him in a low voice. Remember Hokage-sama's words, this is a real battlefield. Wipe that look off your face, like you're going on a picnic. Oh. Soda flinched, quickly suppressed the smile on his face, and, imitating his captain, adopted a serious and vigilant expression. But his darting eyes still betrayed his inner excitement. Tachibana Shilin followed at the very back of the team, her emotions the most complex. On one hand, there was fear of this terrifyingly real battlefield. On the other hand, as a medical ninja, she was deeply drawn to everything here. She saw a passing medical ninja whose medical pack had several dark red bloodstains on its back. From a professional perspective, the color and coagulation of those bloodstains indicated they were at least 5 hours old, and the bleeding had been significant. She could even smell the mixture of hemostatic herbs and alcohol emanating from that medical ninja. All these details made Tachibana Shilin feel a surge of panic. This was no longer a simple genjutsu, this was the creation of a world. How did Hokage-sama and teacher Shinku manage to do this? Tachibana Shilin murmured to herself, feeling genuine awe at the unfathomable methods of the Konoha higher-ups. Sarutobi Bocheng, walking in the middle, appeared much calmer. He didn't look around like Sota, nor was he captivated by details like Shilin. Sarutobi Bocheng crouched down and once again picked up a pinch of soil from the ground. Captain, look. He handed the soil to Yexian. The soil here is very sticky and has extremely high water content. In this environment, earth release ninjutsu will be greatly weakened, but water release ninjutsu will receive a significant boost. The young man stood up and pointed to the hazy clouds in the sky. Furthermore, I just sensed that the water vapor in the air is unusually dense, which will severely affect the burning efficiency of fire release. Our combination jutsu, Fire Tornado, will likely struggle to unleash its full power here. Also, listen. Bo Xing closed his eyes and listened intently. The sound of rain, the sound of wind, these sounds mixed together will interfere with our auditory judgment. In this environment, any reconnaissance methods relying on sound will become much more difficult. This calm and professional analysis instantly sobered Sota, who had still been somewhat excited. Indeed, their previous training at the Ninja Academy had always taken place in sunny training grounds. They had never considered that a simple rainy day could also affect a battle. As expected of our calm navigator, Boshing. Sota said with some admiration, I was just too excited and didn't think of any of this. This is basic knowledge. Boshing adjusted his slightly askew forehead protector and said calmly, Hokage-sama said that an excellent ninja, the moment he steps onto the battlefield, must complete a comprehensive analysis of the timing, terrain, and human factors, and then formulate the most advantageous tactics. Yexian nodded in approval. This was precisely what he valued most about Boshing. Although he couldn't match Yexian and Sota in the explosive power of his ninjutsu, he was the core of the entire squad in terms of tactical thinking and attention to detail. With a mixture of awe and nervousness, the four walked through this seemingly living history. Every step they took was cautious, fearing they might disturb this era that didn't belong to them. The conversations of the surrounding ninja clearly reached their ears. This cursed weather, my arthritis is acting up again, it's killing me. A Chunin, who appeared slightly older, complained to his companion while rubbing his knee. Be content, it's good enough to come back alive. His companion patted his shoulder and sighed. Yesterday, Squad B went on reconnaissance, and only one came back alive. I heard they encountered a Sunagaker puppet master. That guy, he could control a dozen puppets by himself, like a monster. Ha 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 ha. Last night, Jiraiya-sama was punched by Lady Tsunade from the east end of the camp to the west end. These conversations, full of daily life and the realism of the battlefield, left the four members of Yexian completely stunned. Lady Tsunade, Lord Orochimaru, Lord Jiraiya, these names, like legends in the village, became so vivid and real on this virtual battlefield. They were no longer rumors people spoke of, no longer distant records in books. The four members of the Yexian squad felt they weren't experiencing a genjutsu or playing a game. They were going against the current, personally touching a burning piece of history, the history of Konoha. This feeling stirred a surge of excitement and a sense of mission in each of their hearts. Uchiha Yexian walked more steadily, his steps becoming firmer. The commander's tent was already in sight. That seemingly ordinary military tent now seemed to radiate a sacred light in their eyes. Because they knew that inside the tent sat the legends themselves. As they were lost in thought, the commander's tent, lit by candlelight, was already close at hand. Two ninja with steady auras stood guard at the tent entrance like statues. Their eyes were sharp as eagles, scanning every approaching person. Just as the four of them hesitated whether to step forward, one of the ninja, seemingly having received an order, paused his gaze on them for a moment, then nodded slightly. He stepped forward and lifted the heavy tent flap. Whoosh! Uchiha Yexian's heart tensed. He gave his three companions a look, then led the way towards the tent. As the heavy curtain was lifted, a mix of strong tobacco and ink smells wafted out. Inside the tent, candles burned brightly. A bold and resonant voice was deploying something. So, my conclusion is that old Hanzo wants to drag us, Sunagaker, and Iwagakure into this muddy land of rain, creating a chaotic free-for-all. It was Jiraiya's voice. The four of them took a deep breath and stood at the entrance, hesitating for a moment. It felt like mortals about to step into a divine palace, filled with awe and apprehension. Hey, what are you four standing stupid at the entrance for? The bold voice sounded again, tinged with confusion. The four of them jolted, then reacted, quickly lowering their heads and hurrying into the tent that seemed to connect the past and the present. As soon as they stepped in, they were immediately awestruck by the sight before them. The interior space of the tent was much larger than they had imagined. Dozens of thick wooden poles supported the huge tent, and the ground was covered with thick, soft waterproof tarpaulin. The air, thick with the mingled scents of tobacco, ink, and sweat, was even more concentrated. Far from being unpleasant, it carried a scent of iron and blood that made their adrenaline surge uncontrollably. And most striking was the giant 5-meter-long, 2-meter-wide sand table map that occupied the entire center of the tent. It wasn't a simple flat map. It was meticulously crafted, perfectly recreating the terrain and landscape of the entire land of rain. Rolling mountains, winding rivers, vast primeval forests, and even important towns and fortresses were vividly marked with different colored materials. On the sand table, many small flags representing different forces were planted. Red represented Konoha. Yellow represented Sunagakure. Brown represented Iwagakure. There were also some black ones, representing the mysterious Omegakure ninja. At this moment, a group of terrifyingly powerful ninja were gathered around the sand table, discussing something intensely. And the four members of the Yexian squad, after just one glance, felt their hearts stir with excitement. Because they saw too many figures only seen in legends or on the walls of honor. Standing at the top of the sand table, pointing out the landscape with spirited gestures, and analyzing the battle situation with spitting enthusiasm, was undoubtedly the legendary man, Jiraiya. He looked much handsomer than in his portraits, and also more uninhibited. His iconic long white hair was casually draped behind him, he wore a Konoha forehead protector with a Uzumaki pattern, and his face was full of hearty smiles. He wore only a simple black combat suit, revealing two sturdy arms. Just standing there, he exuded a fiery aura like the sun, drawing all eyes to him. And by Jiraiya's side stood several equally extraordinary figures. A handsome man with an elegant demeanor was smiling, listening to Jiraiya's analysis, nodding in agreement from time to time. There was a faint scratch at the outer corner of his right eye, but this did not detract from his handsomeness, instead, it added a touch of mature charm. It's teacher Shinku. Tachibana Shilin was the first to recognize him, exclaiming softly. Although the teacher Shinku before them was younger than in reality, that unique, calm demeanor of a genjutsu master was exactly the same. And next to teacher Shinku stood a somewhat gloomy-looking man. He wore a gray robe, his hands tucked into his sleeves, his face expressionless, but his eyes seemed to pierce through people's hearts, sending shivers down their spines. The Kurama clan, its clan head Kurama Yunhai. Sarutobi Bocheng also recognized him. The Kurama clan, one of Konoha's oldest genjutsu clans, whose bloodline limit could even turn genjutsu into reality, possessed unfathomable strength. And Kurama Yunhai was the current clan head, and although he had not awakened his bloodline limit, he was also an experienced ninja. The four members of the Yexian squad stood blankly in the corner of the tent, feeling like four mortals who had stumbled into a mythical age, as insignificant as mayflies. They held their breath, not daring to even take a deep one, fearing they might disturb these legends who were deciding the future of the ninja world. Shimura Soda's face, which usually wore a cheerful smile, was now incredibly serious. He quietly nudged Yexian's arm and whispered, "Captain. I feel my legs are a bit weak. This setup is too grand, isn't it? Shish, your legs haven't been strong for a day or two." Yexian squeezed out a few words through gritted teeth. Uchiha Yexian's single Tomo Sharingan spun frantically at this moment, trying to record everything he saw. These legendary figures, their expressions when discussing battle situations, their logic when analyzing intelligence, their decisiveness when giving orders, all of this was incredibly valuable to him. He remembered what his father and Lord Kagami had told him. Yexian, your eyes shouldn't only see the Uchiha. You must see further, see all of Konoha, all of the ninja world. Yes, this was the true perspective of a cage. Just as Yexian's mind was surging with emotion, the discussion by the sand table entered a heated phase. Lord Jiraiya, according to our intelligence team's analysis, a group of Omegakure ninja recently secretly traveled in this direction by waterway. I suspect that Hanzo might be hiding a surprise attack force there. Next to Shinku Yuhi stood a mysterious-looking man wearing sunglasses. His clothes were tightly wrapped around him, emitting an indescribable scent. An elite of the Aburame clan. Those Sunagakure and Omegakure guys are like a bunch of cowardly turtles. By the sand table, Jiraiya's voice sounded again. They send out small fry, making insignificant probes. Since these villages are all playing hide and seek and testing each other, then we'll play along with them. Jiraiya's face showed a mischievous smile. Our tactics are the same. Reconnaissance, counter-reconnaissance. We'll also use small units to infiltrate their territory. Kurama, have your unit ready at all times. Once Sunagakure's puppet unit is spotted, I need you to create an opportunity. No problem. Kurama Yunhai's voice was a bit hoarse, but full of confidence. Watching this group of legendary figures cooperate so seamlessly, discussing tactics. A strong sense of pride welled up in Yexian's heart. This is Konoha. This is the strength of our village. With such a powerful and reliable group of seniors fighting fiercely on the front lines, it's no wonder the village has such great cohesion. Jiraiya seemed to have thought of something and suddenly grinned, showing a hearty smile. After speaking, his sharp gaze once again fell on Shinku Yuhi, and his tone became incredibly solemn. Shinku, the supply line from the village to the camp is our lifeline, it absolutely cannot be compromised. The Omegakure rats have been active recently, so I'm entrusting this matter to you. Lead your Genjutsu squad, cooperate with a few regular squads, and ensure the absolute safety of the transportation route. Yes, Jiraiya-sama. Kurenai Yuhi bowed to receive the order, her usually composed face now showing a solemnity befitting wartime. She knew what this supply line meant for the Konoha ninja on the entire Land of Rain battlefield. Jiraiya nodded, then picked up several scrolls sealed with mission information from the table behind him. He surveyed the squad leaders in the tent and began to assign missions in a loud voice. First squad, you are responsible for patrolling the northern area, focusing on monitoring Iwagakure's movements. Second squad, head to the west of the camp and root out all those Sunagakure scouts hiding in the forest. Yes. One by one, the squad leaders received the heavy mission scrolls from Jiraiya. Without a word, they gave a deep bow and then turned and swiftly exited the tent. The entire process was filled with the ninja's characteristic ruthlessness and efficiency. The 4 members of Yexian's squad stood quietly in the corner, watching the tense yet orderly scene unfolding before them, feeling their breathing slow. Is this war? Is this truly the frontline command center that decides the life and death of countless people? Shimura Soda's always passionate heart was now infected by this stern atmosphere. He instinctively clenched his fists, wishing he could also rush to the battlefield like those seniors and contribute his strength to the village. Soon, all the squad leaders in the tent had received their missions and left, leaving only Jiraiya, and Orochimaru and Lady Tsunade, who were still conversing quietly in the distance. The anomaly occurred again. Yexian suddenly felt his right hand sink without warning. He instinctively looked down, raising an eyebrow. A scroll. A mission scroll, identical to those held by the squad leaders just now, sealed with wax, had silently appeared in his hand. What is this? Yexian was stunned. Soda, Bocheng, and Shilin also saw the scroll in his hand, their eyes wide. It was at this moment that the familiar, steady voice of the third Hokage echoed in the minds of all 4 of them once again. D-rank simulated mission generated. Reconnaissance of the eastern defense line of Hidden Rain Village. For mission details, please consult the scroll. It was Hokage-sama's voice. Uchiha Yexian suddenly became excited. Whether it was the Konoha in reality, which was rapidly developing and becoming prosperous and united, or the Konoha before him, filled with war and smoke, yet equally united. Behind them both stood the same man. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, who, by his own efforts, had swayed an entire era. The reverence for this leader in Yexian's heart had reached an unprecedented peak. Yexian no longer felt any confusion or apprehension. From this moment on, he was a true Konoha ninja. He was a squad leader on whom Hokage-sama placed great hopes. He clutched the scroll tightly in his hand, as if grasping the future in an instant. Go to the supply depot and get your equipment. Then, depart. Hokage-sama's voice carried a gentle smile. Captain. Shimura Soda's voice pulled him back from his daze. Yexian collected himself and glanced at his three teammates beside him. In Soda's eyes, there was undisguised excitement and eagerness. Bocheng and Shilin also looked at him curiously. They were comrades. They were, as Hokage-sama had said, backs that could unconditionally trust each other on the battlefield. Yexian nodded to his three comrades. Let's go. The four turned, no longer with any hesitation or uncertainty, and walked out of the command tent, which symbolized the core of the war. Outside the tent, the cold rain continued to fall. But in their hearts, a fire seemed to be burning brightly. As the four members of Yexian's squad walked out of the main commander's tent, the continuous drizzle outside seemed to lose some of its chill. The clamor in the camp continued, but now, in their ears, those noisy sounds seemed to transform into war drums. This is great. We have a mission. And it's personally issued by Hokage-sama. Shimura Soda's cheeks were flushed with excitement. He clenched his fist and whispered to Yexian, Captain, where are we going now? His hot-blooded fervor made Tachibana Shilin, who was beside him, roll her eyes. Idiot Soda, didn't you hear Hokage-sama's hint? Sarutobi Bocheng pointed to a sizable tent in the corner of the camp. On the tent flap, two large characters were written in crude handwriting, supplies. The system prompted us to get equipment first. Bocheng's tone was calm, but a curious light flickered in his eyes. He had already started using the term, system prompt, to refer to Hokage-sama's guidance. Oh, right, get equipment. Soda slapped his head and chuckled foolishly. Without further delay, the four hurried through the muddy camp and arrived at the supply depot. Inside the tent, the light was dim, and the air was filled with the smell of rust and leather. A Chunin, who looked to be about 30 or 40 years old with a long sword scar on his face, was sitting behind a table, expressionlessly recording something in a thick ledger. Thanks for watching.